Hi, I'm Euge Valovirta, and on this video I'm gonna go through the gear I've used in studio with Cyhra, Red Wolf, Shining, Suburban Tribe, Godsplague, and Drive, and my solo album. Yes, indeed. I've gotten quite a few questions during the years about the gear I've used on my band's albums, so I'll try to answer them all in this video. Let's start from the latest one. So, Red Wolf's Session Volume 1, which was released October 2020. The guitars. My signature ESP, and I used this on the songs that has a standard D and drop C tuning. Then this, another of my signatures. This used to be the Shining guitar because this has a Shining logo painted here. ESP's Japan custom shop made me this back in the day, and that I used on a couple of songs that has a drop B flat tuning. Then this E2 Eclipse, I used this on some like octave harmony things on a couple of songs because, well, the tuning is just great, especially if you're doing, like multiple harmonies. Then my trusty old Tokai, I used this on one song that had a drop D tuning. My signature ESPs are based on this. And yeah, my custom shop, Tom, aka Tompa. I used this on one song that had drop C tuning, and there was riff that had this, two riffs that had this whammy bar thing going on. So I used this on that one. Those were the guitars. The amps. I used my Marshall 800s. This one from 84 with 6550 power tubes. That's on guitar left. And this from 85 with EL34s. That's on guitar right. And they both went into Sir Reactive Load, where I had Jens Bogren's Sound of God EQ2 impulse response. Then into the DAW. And that was the only IR I used on the whole album. Rhythms, leads, everything. Pedals, I used Bass SD1, which was basically on all the time, except when I did those octave harmonies on a couple of songs, then it was just the amp. And then ISP decimator, just to get rid of the hiss. And that was the basic tone. Then on a couple of songs, on a couple of riffs, I used Digitech Whammy, and the wah I used was a Jim Dunlop, Jimi Hendrix Crybaby. And there's one song, Watch It Burn, that has a clean part, and I used on that part STL Tones Howard Benson plugin and the Fender Tweed and Twin plugins emulations. I was actually, the guitars are from the demo, because when I was recording the actual guitars, I went back to the demo like, okay, what did I play here? And I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. And it's actually, the demo is on the same tempo than the actual album. So I was just, well, why fix it if it ain't broke and sounds great? So I used the demo guitars. I had no idea what guitar was there, but yeah, it was the Howard Benson plugin. And I had there the reverb and delay was from the plugin, and then there's chorus and compression, and those were, I used Logic to track the guitars in the album, and the chorus and compressor are from Logic's own pedal board plugin. That was it. All the other delays, reverb, whatever there is, were done in the post, in the mixing. Matthias Dörngren, who mixed the album, put a little bit delay on the leads. That was it. And leads I used mostly the 6550. I did a couple of leads with EL34. Okay, then Cyhra's No Halos in Hell. Well, I tracked almost all of the leads in my home studio, and I used this guitar. I think it had EMG 5766 set back then, because these are really easy to change, because there's no like soldering, it's just this pop connection. So yeah, those pickups were on that guitar, and this was the one I played most of the leads and melodies. Because in the studio in Denmark, Jacob Hansen's studio, I tracked rhythm guitars and some cleanish, like additional guitars and bass. And there was a lot of guitars, different guitars. For the rhythms, I used not this one, but a similar one, which has black hardware. It's at the moment in Gothenburg at Cyhra's headquarters, because of the COVID we haven't been able to tour, and we did our last tour in UK in February 2020, and we were supposed to go out again after that quite soon, but you know, things didn't work out as planned, so 3 of my guitars that I use live with Cyhra and on the album has been in Gothenburg ever since. It was basically this. It had a 57 and 66 EMGs. And then the white guitar, that's kind of a main guitar in Cyhra. I use that one too. Nowadays it has 57, 66, but when I recorded the album, it had EMG 81, 85 pickups. And then I used my LTD Iron Cross James Hetfield signature on some tracks that has the headset, pickup set. And then all the other guitars I used were Hansen's or the assistant engineer Jonas Hagensen's, who recorded the guitars and bass with me. So we used Stratocaster Fender on some parts, then a Telecaster, mainly for the octave things. I don't remember the brand. It was some like boutique small brand, great guitar. And then I used a 7-string guitar on a few occasions, same brand, don't remember what, but EMG 81 pickup I think it had. And then the other 7-string I used is this ESP custom shop. Kia, my wife, so used this also. Then I used also on rhythms, especially on choruses that has big chords, I used Jacob Hansen's ESP Horizon with EMG 81, 85 and Evertune bridge. It's, you know, big chords. Evertune stays in tune really well. And the acoustics I used my K-Irie DY62C. This has been through a lot. The body has been glued. It's been, yeah, workhorse, great guitar. Then I also used a Jake's acoustic guitar. I think it's a Yamaha. And I used that on the acoustic parts I played in the studio, and this I used in my home studio, what I did. Mainly the acoustic versions of some songs that are on the bonus CD, digipack version of the album. And I think that was, yeah, bass, because I played bass on the album as well. I used a Hensen's Ernie Ball Music Man Stingray 5-string bass, but I tuned it basically like a 4-string and just, you know, ignored the highest string there. And amps, what we used, when we recorded, we used EVH 5150 and the 5150 cab mic'd with SM57, but just for monitoring, because we were recording DI tracks, because Henson likes to work that he dials and chooses the amps when he's mixing. He has a lot of great amps in the studio and guitars and a lot of gear. So basically we used the 5150 only for monitoring, because it's pretty uninspiring to play just with the DI sound. So we recorded the DI sound. And what was being used, because the thing is that when the album was mixed, I didn't want to know what gear was used. I only wanted to trust my ears, not any presumptions. So when Henson sent me, you know, tracks, or, you know, all of us, I had some comments that, hey, could you do this and could you do that for the tone and blah, blah, blah. And then when we were like, okay, now it sounds great. So then I asked that, okay, what was the actual gear that we used? So I have here's what Jacob wrote. Your left side amp is Engel Fireball 60 and the right is the 5153. Both have the Maxon OD 820 pedal on. It's the a little bit bigger version overdrive. And 2 cabinets with different microphones. Bayer M160, SM57, ADK A51 and Sennheiser MD441. It was 2 cabinets, one oversized Mesa with V30s and one Engel with V30s as well. They sound different and the mix between them sounds great. And there was a little bit EQ going on, but not that much. Bass is DI only. I just split the bass up in Sans Amp Drive, a dirty distortion pedal, Big Muffish, and a high frequency list for the clang. And melodies, leads and solos, we used plugins, because those seem to work the best, or Henson used. So mainly it's Softtube's Metal Amp Room, and also because funny thing is, because I was tracking the melodies and leads at home, and I recorded, you know, de-essing, you know, I just sent them to Henson. But then, in the last minute before I was going on vacation with my wife, we changed a few arrangements, a few songs, and I played, obviously, new guitar parts to them, and I just did a couple of solos fast. And I used the STL Tones Howard Benson, the red Marshall Plexi, plus 2 screamer and delay. So I just made like, I think it was MP3 files, and I sent them to Henson, and the guy said, hey, here's what I thought this should go. Please let me know. I'm going on vacation, but when I come back, I will re-record them. And then after a while, I called or sent an email to Henson, and the guy said, hey, what did you like about the yeah, it's great. They're on the album already. It's mixed. I will send you the, you know, full mixes soon. I was like, oh, but that was just me noodling around and different ideas. No, that's great. Sounds great. I just used the MP3s what you sent to me. It's like, okay, cool. So that's that. And clean, semi-clean and slightly dirty / overdriven guitars, different Kemper profiles by Jonas Hagensen. I remember that I tracked some of these guitars with the Kemper, and I think it was profiles that Jonas had made. I think it was like Vox AC30 and probably Matchless combo. So that's the gear on No Halos in Hell. And basically the same gear was used on Letters to Myself, except not the STL Tones Howard Benson plugin, because I didn't have that back then, and I don't think that it was even released back in the day when we recorded Letters to Myself. But basically it's the same gear. Then my solo album. Guitars, And yeah, effects on Cyhra's album. So yeah, the OD was the Hansen's Maxon. Then I used John Petrucci, Crybaby Wah, the Jimi Hendrix Wah, and Full Tones, Clyde Deluxe Wah. And EVH Phaser, one song, and that was about it, the effects. And then again, you know, all the delays, whatever, were added in the mix. Cool. Yeah, my solo album. I used this one and then I used this one. They were in different tunings. That was in standard E/drop D, and this was in standard D/drop C. And then for the chicken picking country stuff, I used my Tokai Telecaster Seymour Duncan Antique Series pickups. The neck is actually a Warmoth neck because I wanted to have a 22 fret neck. I can't play with 21 frets. It confuses me too much. So this was what I used. And then I also used the producer Lauri Hämäläinen's Gretsch Falcon, that big semi-hollow, you know, with the Bixby Vibra bar. And I think on one song, a completely clean part, we used like Lauri's Ibanez, kind of like Strat-like single coil stuff. And I didn't use any real amps on the album. It's Universal Audio's Friedman plugins. The distorted guitars are the Friedman BE plugin, and the semi-dirty, cleanish guitars are the Friedman Dirty Shirley plugin. No idea what IRs or cabinets we used. I think we just scrolled the list and, this sounds good, let's use that. That was it, really simple. And effects, I think I used the full tone, Clyde Deluxe Wah, on that one only. And bass compressor for the chicken picking stuff. And I used a Rat, you know, the Rat pedal plugging in front of the Friedman. I had my SD and real pedals and we tried different plugins, but the Rat just seemed to work the best for the sound we were going for. I think that was about the effects. Maybe I used chorus ensemble on some of the clean guitars and phaser and flanger. Can't remember for sure, but I, you know, had my usual pedal board there and so on. Okay, then Shining, number 10. I used one electric guitar on the whole album, and it's this. All the cleans, rhythms, leads, everything, it's this. Then I used the producer Andy LaRocque's acoustic guitar. I can't remember what it was, but it was great. So yeah, well, it was the only guitar. EMG 8185, it had black EMGs back then and no stickers. And amps, we used only Kemper. We used, Andy had done a great profiles of his gear. So the main guitars, the distorted guitars, were a 5150, the original one, and into oversized Mesa with V30s, the Kemper profile. And then I think I used my GT OD in front, so I had a real overdrive. I had SD1 and the ZW, Zakk Wylde overdrive, but I think we ended up using the GT OD. Seemed to work the best. And then clean/semi-clean guitars, we used Andy's profile of his Fender Tweed amp and his profile of the Rockman, the small DA box that, you know, Def Leppard used heavily on Hysteria. So that was like the clean chorusy guitars. There's not that much, but there's little. It's designed by Boston's Tom Schultz. And I used my Henrik's Wa, some of the solos. That was it. And then Shining number 9, I used my Wagner Fish preamp into Engel. I think it was Engel Savage 120. It was Andy's amp because Andy produced that also. He produced a lot of Shining albums. So I had the Wagner Fish preamp, and then we hooked that into Andy's Engel's power amp, and we used, I think the cabinet was Engel with V30s, Andy's cabinet. And when I had the sound, we mic'd up everything, I was really happy. Andy made a profile out of it with Kemper, and that was the first time I probably even saw Kemper like live. I was quite hesitant, like, nah, man, what are you doing? And he was like, well, just let me see, just, you know. So then I went back in and started to play. Like, yeah, damn, my gear sounds good. And then I told Andy, like, okay, you know, switch to the Kemper so we can see how it sounds. And it was like, well, Euge, you have played with the Kemper the whole time. I was like, okay, I think we're gonna use that then. Because the reason was because it was so easy, because we, you know, dialed my sound, mic'd the cabs, and then we dialed Peter Hu's sound. He used some Marshall and the Engel cabinet and stuff. So then we had both of our sounds in the Kemper, so we just easily changed our sounds whoever was playing. So that's why the Kemper. And then we used the real Fender Tweed and the Rockman, because back then Andy did a profile of those, but those didn't sound good enough. So I think the firmware wasn't as good as it was a couple of years after when we did the Shining number 10. So we used the real amps on that. And then on the clean guitars, I used Andy's Comparison with the Evertune bridge. I think it has single coils. And again, Andy's acoustic guitar, whatever it was. Or maybe I had the KJ with me. I'm not sure. And the overdrive, I think we used, I don't actually remember. I had the SD one, the GTOD, then Peter had some, he has a huge collection of overdrives, so maybe we used several, can't remember what was being used and what. But there was, you know, the usual overdrive in front of already distorted amp to make it tighter. Okay, and then the two previous Shining albums, they were recorded in the same session, I think. But I wasn't in the studio because I was recording my own band's Godsplague's album, which so far is our latest. We've been on a hiatus since 2012 or 13. So then Peter plays all the guitars on those, and I kind of was like a live member then, but I was supposed to play a bit, but then, yeah. So on the Godsplague album, my main guitar was this one. It's a Revival. So Tokai, Les Paul Standard, EMG 8185. I didn't have my ESP's signatures back then, so I had my 4 Tokais, just a couple more, and that standard one just sounded the best. And then for the a little bit cleaner stuff and some octave harmonies and stuff, I used the Cele. Those were the 2 guitars I used. And then amps, I played like 2 setups simultaneously. So I had a splitter, and then it went to the Wagner Fish, into VHG 252 power amp, into the Friet fat bottom cabinet with Eminence P50E speakers. They're kind of best of both worlds from greenbacks and V30s. So they have this warmth and big low end of greenbacks, and then the aggressive top and balanced mids of V30s. Great cab, great speakers. So that was on another. Then we had like 3 microphones in there. I don't remember, probably 57, you know, some Sennheiser, some ribbon mic, the usual. And then the other amp, and that setup was dialed like really heavy gain, lots of low end and stuff. And the other amp was the producer Erkka Korhonen's Wagner Ecstasy and Ecstasy cabinet. I think that had a greenbacks and V30s. And that was dialed like really mid-focused, kind of low gain sound. So, and 3 microphones. So whenever I was playing, it was like 6 tracks of guitar sounds, and then channel left is a mix of those. And then I doubled my guitars, and channel right is a little bit different mix of those signals that the microphones picked up. Effects, I used Jimi Hendrix Crybaby Wah. I'm not sure about the overdrive. It was either a Boss SD1 or then this replica of Tube Screamer 808 Ibanez. Like the exact parts, There's this Finnish guy who had found the actual parts, and he made I don't remember how many, but you know, I was one of the lucky ones to get one or buy one from him while they lasted. I don't have it here now, but I'll put a picture. I think I have it somewhere. I still have the pedal. I think it was that or the SD, or maybe both. Not sure. And then, you know, the usual, some chorus ensemble on some tracks, some MXR Phase 90, some flanger in there. And again, all delays, reverbs were added in the mix, if there is any. Basically only on leads. That was that, and then Suburban Tribes, Now One Ever After. So, guitars. I used this one, Tokai. Then this Tokai, basically the same, just without the graphics. It had EMG 8185 back then. Then I used my Tele. And then this 7-string and another 7-string. This has EMG 707 because this was made in, it's a custom shop. It was made in early 2000s, and EMG only had the 707 as a 7-string pickup because 7-strings were not that common back then. It sounds really, well, honestly, I can't tell a difference between 81 and this, so maybe this is 81, but it was just called 707. I don't know. But if there's a difference, it's very subtle. And the amps, Wagner Fish preamp, VHT 252 power amp, Fryette Sigex, or VHT, it was called back then, but now it's called Fryette, but the Sigex head, some high watt, 100 watt head, don't remember what, for like cleanish guitars or mildly overdriven, orange, some orange head, and I'm not sure if I had my 800 there. I don't remember. And the cabinet, only cabinet we used was this. Then Fender Twin, and I guess that's it. The overdrive I was using Boss SD1. The wah is the Jimi Hendrix Crybaby. Then Digitech Whammy, and then the usual Boss Chorus Ensemble, Flanger, BF2, BF3. I have both. I've been using, no idea what was used, which one I used on what. And MXR Phase 90. And then on some tracks I remember that we used MXR, the Sonic Maximizer, the pedal, because sometimes we were just like, man, something's missing, and then we just added the Sonic Maximizer, like, okay, it works. I had the pedal back then. I think that was the gear on that one. And then I think it was a live bonus album we did with Suburban Tribe. One of our best-selling albums. I wasn't in the band back then when it was recorded, but then when it went gold or something, we did like special edition, and we recorded one of our shows and we played those songs, at least most of them. So I used the 7-string guitars, which I used live, because we had like 3 tunings. It was E flat standard, and then drop tuning of that, and then drop G sharp. So the other guitarist, Roope Siren, he changed guitars, but I just used those 2 7-strings because, you know, in the E flat songs I didn't use the lower strings, and then on the really down-tuned songs I used the low 7-string. And I don't remember what gear I used on that show when it was recorded, but it was either a Wagner Fish into the VHT power amp or Marshall JMP1 preamp into the VHT power amp or Fried Sigex head. Cool. Then I think it's Godsplague's Hate album, H8 album. I used guitars, this one, this one, this one, and this one. They were in different tunings and stuff. And then I also used a Grinch baritone guitar I had back then, I think on one song. Amps, or amp. I used 1 amp and 1 cabinet, and it was Krankenstein amp and cabinet. So the Dimebag Darrell signature, boosted with Boss SD1, and the wah was the Jimi Hendrix Crybaby. And I think I used the whammy on somewhere, probably again chorus, phaser, flanger on some parts, just to give it a little bit more, you know, things. That's it. And yeah, Aleksi Laiho, Children of Bodom, Aleksi, friend of mine, he plays on the album on one song. We have this kind of duet thing going on. So he used my gear, his own guitar, obviously. Okay, then I think it's another Suburban Tribe. Like we did this best of album where we re-recorded some older songs and some covers. And on that I used my 7 strings and probably, I think I did the leads on this one. And the Krankenstein head and cabinet boosted with SD1. And whammy, there's some whammy thing going on. And the usual chorus, phaser, flanger things occasionally somewhere. Okay, then it's Godsplague's second album, I believe, Triumph. I used mainly this, I think. And these two, yeah, I don't remember what was actually, which one I used, or maybe I used both, but it was basically, there's one guitar on the album most of the time. So I did a split, and the other went into, well, first Boss SD1, chorus, ensemble, and wah. There's basically chorus going on all the time. And I used also the Digitech Whammy's D-tune setting for chorus. And then the other signal went into either these two, and then went into, I don't remember the cabinet we used, or the mic. I have no idea what was used. And then the other signal went into the Marshall JMP1 preamp and directly to the mixing board. So that was the gear on Triumph. And then Godsplague first album, Evolution. I used, again, this one. Probably this one too. And these two. And Bass SD1, chorus ensemble, wah wah. That was pretty much it. And again, it was produced by Petteri Hirvonen, who produced Triumph. So we were at his studio and we used the same cabinet than on Triumph that I completely forgot what it was, but it was these two amps. And guitar left, I had the chorus going on, and then the other amp didn't have a chorus in front. So, yeah. Then a Drive, this kind of Fear Factory type band we had at the same time. We only did one album and a couple of tours in Finland. I used, I don't have any of the guitars I used on the album, but no, I have a list here, I almost forgot. So I have written down, this was in like early 2000. So guitars, ESP LTD EC300 with Seymour Duncan Dimebucker on the bridge and EMG 81. I remember I tracked first with the Dimebucker, but wasn't really feeling it, and then I went back to my trusty old EMG 81, which I've used always. But I think we left the tracks that I used with Dimebucker. And then, yeah, the Grinch baritone and Falcon miniature Strat, which was tuned like octave higher. So, yeah, on Borwick Corvette standard bass. I played some bass parts on the album as well. And the amplifier was the original PV5150, boosted with Bass Super Overdrive. And then I have written here that we used also Bass HM2 heavy metal. Maybe some overdubs with that, you know, that really old school Swedish death metal sound. And Dunlop Crybaby, but I think it was the Hendrix one, or maybe it was just a standard one. Boss CFI chorus ensemble, a Rocktron Hush to get rid of the noise, and Ibanez rotary chorus, and Dud Milk Box compressor, and Ibanez multi-mode analog delay, and a Marshall Bluesbreaker combo, and a Bedrock 1066 combo. And the cabinet I used with the 5150 was a PV 4x12M cabinet. So not the 5150 cabinet, but the M cabinet, mic'd with SM57 and Sennheiser MD421. Yeah. I think this was the only time I've written what I've used. So I think I covered my band's albums, but then I've done like tens, hundreds of sessions, you know, guest appearances on albums, or then, you know, as a hired gun, hired by a producer to play like certain guitar parts or solos or do arrangements for artists, bands. I played banjo on Children of Bodoms, the cover album they did. Alexi called me and, you know, it was a fun session. And, well, I've used all my guitars. I've used these amps a lot on those. These ones I haven't used because I got these actually this year, 2020. But I've used these on a lot of my YouTube videos. Great amps. You know, how it sounds is the most important thing, not what is being used. Whether it's a tube amp, a Kemper, or a plugin. Doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is the end result. If it sounds good, it's good. Hey, thanks for watching. I know this was a bit long and there was no playing, but on the next video I will be playing again. Bye.